After 39 years of marriage, I discovered last month that she had been unfaithful for the past 6 years, engaging in multiple affairs, most frequently with a young immigrant she met during her numerous trips to France. I am 63 years old, and she is 61. Both of us are of French origin, having grown up in the south of France, but we currently live in California. I had complete trust in her and never once questioned her loyalty. Our marriage was long and beautiful, filled with laughter, love, companionship, and mutual admiration. However, everything changed when I stumbled upon a collection of videos they had made together. I have an appointment with an attorney later today. A little background about us. Let's go back to the time when we first met in 1977. I was 21 years old. We encountered each other at a summer camp in the United States. She had come with her family to Northern California, and I had been living with my uncle in the area for over 2 years at that point. I was at the beach with my French-speaking friends, and she was there with her family. I approached her, and we struck up a conversation. We got along well, and it turned out we hailed from the same small town situated between Nice and Caen in France. I was introduced to her family, including her siblings. I became her summer boyfriend, and our relationship began before she returned to France. A few months later, she came back, and I eventually visited her in France. Our first intimate encounter was on a beach in Corsica in 1978. We got married in 1981 and moved to the Los Angeles area in 1984. A few years later, our now 29-year-old son was born, and we relocated to Southern California in 1997. Until the arrival of COVID-19, she managed a travel agency that enabled us to explore the world extensively, and we traveled even more after my retirement. We frequently flew for free, often in first class. I believed this would be our life together until death do us part. She must have made the LA-Venice round trip about 200 times easily, always providing reasons for her trips to France. During my retirement, I joined her on a few occasions. It's not as if she was ever too far away or for extended periods. She's now striving to save her business, which was severely affected by the pandemic. She genuinely loves the Venice area and the French lifestyle, but she never truly left them behind. She worked for several airlines before establishing her own travel agency 25 years ago, leading to our frequent travels between the two locations. We experienced periods of a lack of intimacy, but on average, we were active in bed about 3-4 times per week. However, in recent years, due to my recovery from 2 types of cancer, prostate and bladder, our frequency has decreased. My drive is not what it used to be. During her 40s, she had a bit of extra weight, but about 8 years ago, she decided to get in shape. She engaged in activities like running, hiking, yoga, gymnastics, and adopted a strict diet. By her mid-50s, she was in excellent physical condition and looked fantastic. I used to hike with her for several years, but due to 2 bad knees, I can no longer join her. By hiking, I mean backpacking across the Sierra Nevada for 8 days, not just a 2-hour stroll up Malibu Canyon. She possesses incredible energy and can outperform anyone in her profession, earning her several travel awards. Last year, she returned from France on December 27th after spending Christmas there. She had informed me in advance of her return since I was the one picking her up from the airport. When I picked her up, she had a radiant and different smile. Even though I had picked her up from the airport countless times, this time felt special. We hadn't seen each other for 2 months, so I assumed it was because of that. I was delighted to see her. On the evening of our arrival home, I had already prepared a romantic dinner date. During the dinner, she described all the new places she had visited in France, some of which we had planned to visit together, including romantic destinations. She even mentioned skiing in Les Trois Vallées, Little Venice, Château de Villandry, St. Paul de Venice, and more, many of which were on our bucket list. We were supposed to experience these places together, so I felt disappointed that she went without me. The way she spoke about it almost seemed like she was bragging, and she must have noticed the disappointment in my expression. Still, she didn't inquire about how I felt. I understand the natural question is whether I needed to ask my wife who she traveled with to these romantic locations, but the way she casually mentioned her lover made my concerns appear unfounded. At the time, I still had no reason not to trust my wife. However, over the years, I sensed that something was amiss, although I couldn't pinpoint it. I attributed it to her mother's illness, and noticed that her explanations often lacked detail, even when there was no need for secrecy. Following dinner that evening, she suddenly informed me that she was flying to Martinique over New Year's Eve to visit some friends she had met the previous summer. I expressed my unhappiness and questioned why she couldn't spend New Year's with her husband instead of her girlfriends. She offered various excuses, claiming they already had plans. I reminded her that as a married woman, she shouldn't make plans without her husband. I felt it was selfish, especially since I'd be spending New Year's alone, and I'm retired. Suddenly, she got defensive, accusing me of being the selfish one. She argued that she'd given me more than 39 years of her life, and she'd spent most New Year's Eves with me. She questioned why it was wrong for her to need some time for herself. I explained that the issue was not her needing time for herself, but failing to inform me in advance, given that she'd been gone for 2 months already. She could have spent New Year's with me, or at least let me know so I could make other plans. She refused to hear my side and walked away. In our relationship, we rarely have arguments, and when we do, we usually resolve them the following day without assigning blame. The same happened this time. The next day, we had breakfast together and talked as if we hadn't argued the previous day. However, this time, I couldn't shake the suspicion that there was someone else involved. What troubled me the most was her rejection of intimacy the previous night after more than 2 months of absence. She claimed to have a medical issue down there and had scheduled a doctor's appointment. This was a new development for me, and although I would typically be concerned, something didn't sit right with me this time. I decided to investigate her story about her recent trip with her sister and friends. I had a good relationship with her sister, and she was known to be talkative, so I called her. During our conversation, I mentioned her skiing trip to Les Trois Vallées, and her confusion was evident. I tried to deflect by saying that I thought she had gone with her husband, but she corrected me, denying any such trip. She asked where I got that information, and I claimed it was from a previous conversation, making the phone call awkward yet revealing. I hadn't done anything to give her the impression that my wife was being unfaithful. After the phone call, I felt truly devastated. I wanted to confront my wife, but I knew she'd deny it, leading to a heated argument in which I'd likely be blamed since I lacked concrete evidence of her affair. 2 days later, she planned to fly to Martinique for New Year's Eve, possibly to spend it with her lover instead of me. I wasn't just angry. I felt insecure and like I was losing my wife. I had invested so much effort, and now in my retirement, when I had envisioned spending the rest of my life traveling with her, she was having an affair. My primary concern, and it's a significant one, was that I had overcome 2 cancers with her unwavering support. Now, who would be there for me when the diseases returned? We used to share our innermost secrets, but now she was keeping secrets, lying, appearing happy and carefree, while I felt my inner self slowly wither away. Both types of cancer I faced had a high chance of recurrence, so I knew I was living on borrowed time. But isn't that the case for all of us? I had lived a good and fulfilling life, considering that men in my family often passed away at a young age. My father died at 62, my brother at 60, and my grandfather at 57. I would turn 64 next month, so I considered myself fortunate. However, when the inevitable time came, it would have been comforting to have her by my side, but the woman I knew before seems to have vanished. I turned to this forum seeking help, but the conventional methods of uncovering a cheating spouse didn't seem applicable to my situation. Given the international aspect of her affair, I couldn't easily hire a private investigator to tail her or install a voice recorder. The day before her trip to Martinique for New Year's Eve, I overheard her on the phone while she was in the bathroom during the night. She assumed I was asleep since I'm typically a deep sleeper, but I caught snippets of her conversation. From the way she was simplifying her language, it was evident she was speaking to a non-native French speaker. She was expressing her love for him and her eagerness to be with him. That's when I became certain she was having an affair, possibly with someone not native to France. I was devastated, to say the least, knowing my suspicions were confirmed. When she mentioned sending him photos and videos, I started considering checking her emails or phone to uncover the identity of this man or the extent of her affair. The next morning, she woke up early, prepared breakfast, and I drove her to the airport. After dropping her off, I immediately headed back home, contemplating ways to access her email and retrieve any photos. I knew her old email address and she knew mine, so I hoped she hadn't changed it. Additionally, I intended to investigate our shared account to track her expenditures. Upon returning home, I logged into her email successfully using her password. I combed through her email and discovered plane tickets for her and another man named Cedric. I suspected he might be Algerian, and it appeared she had been buying his tickets for over 2 years, utilizing money from our account to finance her rendezvous with her lover. I delved deeper, hoping to find photos of them together, but nothing turned up in her email. My wife takes numerous photos during her travels, so I knew she had a cache of digital pictures. I recalled that she used to carry a portable hard drive for this purpose years ago, but later transferred the data to a cloud system when it gained popularity. She uses an iPhone, and I remembered setting up her Dropbox account years ago, which automatically uploads her photos and videos once she's in a Wi-Fi zone. I decided to search for her Dropbox link within her email. Fortunately, I found it and clicked it, discovering that her Dropbox used her email and the same password as her Yahoo email. Upon logging in, I found numerous photos and videos featuring her and her affair partner. I uncovered many aspects of my wife's life that I had been unaware of, places she had visited and people she had met. It felt like I was looking at a timeline of her life spanning over 5 years. What particularly caught my attention was a thumbnail of a video where my wife was unclothed. I clicked on the video and watched as she appeared intimate with the much younger Algerian immigrant. I recognized her laughter, giggling, and the affection she showed him, which was akin to the affection she had shown me in the past. When she glanced at the camera as he recorded her, it resembled the way she used to look at me. I was deeply hurt and teary-eyed. Words cannot adequately express how I felt at that moment. I remember stepping outside briefly to get some fresh air before returning to continue watching the videos. There were several more videos of a similar nature, and what stood out was how assertive he was with her. I had no idea she had such preferences. It felt like I didn't truly know my wife of 39 years. The videos dated back over a year, with some as recent as her last trip. Surprisingly, my wife had a penchant for making intimate videos, enjoyed watching adult films, and frequented adult stores. Around 8 years ago, as she started getting into shape and working out, she felt confident and took an interest in recording our intimate moments. She got me involved initially, but I stopped when I realized I was doing it more for her pleasure and didn't share the same enthusiasm. Her interest waned, and I assumed it was a passing phase that had ended. I had no clue it was always part of her, and she had moved on to someone else. As shocking as it may sound, that wasn't all I discovered. I spent the entire day going through her Dropbox photos and videos, stumbling upon a picture of her being intimate with her ex-boyfriend. He was the first guy she'd been intimate with before she met me, and now he's a psychiatrist with grandkids. He hailed from the same area as my wife and me, so they met when she visited her mother, and she had always mentioned him as a friend. Little did I realize they had maintained a close relationship all along. At that moment, I felt as though my entire relationship had been a deception. Perhaps during all her trips to France, she had been having an affair with him throughout our marriage. He was still married to his wife and a respected doctor in his community. My wife kept a photo record of her affair, almost as if she were secretly hoping I would find out. I didn't come across any videos of her with her doctor ex-boyfriend, just intimate pictures and records of their trips together. She had evidently been leading a double or even triple life, traveling between her 2 affair partners. From what I could gather, for the past 2 years, she had been exclusively involved with the Algerian immigrant. The entire day was spent reminiscing as my entire life flashed before my eyes. It seemed like she had never truly been exclusively committed to our relationship. Throughout our marriage, I had the utmost trust in her and never questioned her faithfulness. We had a wonderful, lengthy marriage filled with laughter, love, complicity, and mutual admiration. I battled one cancer in 2008 and another in 2013. She provided unwavering support both times, both before and after the surgeries. Fortunately, I experienced no significant side effects following the robotic Da Vinci surgery, and we resumed our intimate life 3 weeks after the operation. She was the perfect spouse until about 2 years ago when I began to notice we were spending less time together. She started taking frequent trips to visit her ailing mother and used various excuses to travel abroad. On that day, I felt like my entire life was about to change drastically. I had spent my whole life with her, and just as I retired and started thinking about traveling the world together, she began an affair. What stung the most was knowing that while I was going through all the evidence of my wife's affair, she was on her way to meet her affair partner. The following day, I barely got any sleep, and I couldn't keep this to myself any longer. Part of me thought about moving on, perhaps to South America or some Asian country, and finding a younger woman to spend the rest of my life with because I believed my wayward wife had done the same. After all, I had been the only one committed to our relationship. That same day, my wayward wife called to check on me. When I saw her name on the caller ID, I wanted to confront her over the phone, but I knew that this sort of conversation should be in person. I needed to look her in the eyes and witness her attempts to deceive me about her affair. She had only 3 days left on her trip. I distinctly remember speaking to her on the phone the day before she returned from her trip, not mentioning the affair, but she sensed something was amiss, likely due to my unusual responses. I also reached out to a lawyer to explore my options. When she returned from the trip, I didn't pick her up as I usually would. I told her I was busy and suggested she take a cab, which struck her as odd because her flight was in the morning, and I'm usually not occupied at that time. Upon her return that morning, I confronted her with all the evidence I had gathered. I presented her with videos of her engaging in intimate acts with the young Algerian man and pictures of her being affectionate with her ex-boyfriend. The evidence was so overwhelming that she couldn't deny it. To my surprise, it seemed like she had been cheating on me for so long that she didn't even perceive anything wrong with her actions. She believed it was something we could move past. She claimed she didn't want to rush into decisions, but also made it clear she wouldn't decide whether to end her involvement with the Algerian individual. She mentioned the affair with the doctor as an on and off thing, and they hadn't seen each other in a while, without officially ending it. I questioned how she could maintain an affair for so long when our relationship had been based on a lie. I pointed out her complete lack of remorse for her actions. Her excuse was that she thought I was having an affair as well, which she knew was untrue. She suggested I could have an affair if I wanted, but she still wanted to remain in the marriage. I informed her that divorce was now inevitable. She insisted she didn't want a divorce. During that time, she mentioned not wanting to return to her life in Southern California. At first, I didn't fully grasp, or perhaps didn't want to accept her true meaning. However, when she reiterated this sentiment on the 25th of the month while she was here, I understood she meant living with me. In a fit of anger, I threw all her clothes from our bedroom balcony onto the parking lot. Her reaction was one of surprise and shock. It became clear that I was serious about pursuing a divorce. She moved into our son's condo next door, which happened last Monday. Since then, we have had further discussions, but we also both agreed that a divorce was inevitable. We consulted an attorney mediator on Thursday and began the paperwork. I contemplated reporting her affair partner, the doctor, to the Conseil de l'Ordre des Médecins. In my perspective, and I might be mistaken, a psychiatrist holds a moral responsibility toward all individuals, whether they are patients or not. He was aware that by engaging in an affair with a married woman, he would inflict pain and suffering on her husband. Half a century ago, her ex-boyfriend was part of my brother's social circle, and I knew who he was. Apparently, he doesn't remember me. He is about 3 to 4 years older than me, so I estimate he's around 67 years old. He willingly and knowingly partakes in activities that harm other people. As a psychiatrist, he was trained to employ his skills for the purpose of seduction and manipulation, which in essence is what he does professionally, persuade people to take certain actions or cease others. I believe this is highly unethical. Update. I've discovered that her relationship with her ex-boyfriend began around 2015. The three of us hail from a small town called Venice, situated between Nice and Cannes. She consistently told me that she was looking after her elderly mother because her sister wasn't doing enough, or so she claimed. Her ex-boyfriend happened to be her first love. In March of 2015, her sister bumped into him at a pharmacy and informed him that my wife was in town. He gave his phone number to her sister, who then passed it on to my wife. She reached out to him, marking their first contact in 37 years. They started talking, went out for dinner, and there you have it. The south of France is a wonderful place, but I personally prefer Southern California. We've been living here since 1997. We own a beautiful house with an ocean view, and I can enjoy year-round golf for a reasonable cost, which isn't the case in France. After I asked her to leave the house, she's now residing with my son. And no, she hasn't expressed any intention of returning to live with me. She also hasn't apologized for the pain she's caused. I believe she may view herself as a character similar to Francesca or Meryl Streep's role in The Bridges of Madison County and acted on her impulses. Perhaps it was her way of a last hurrah. We consulted with a lawyer mediator yesterday. It was a very disheartening experience. My wife and I worked diligently, especially her. Financially, She wouldn't face any problems living in France. She owns a debt-free condo there. I couldn't extract much of a confession from her, and she provided limited details regarding the timeline, partly because I had already pieced most of it together with the Dropbox pictures, plane tickets, and credit card statements. As for the young Algerian immigrant, she refuses to divulge the circumstances of their meeting. Based on the evidence I uncovered, it seems they had a sugar mommy, sugar baby relationship. She believes he's in love with her, but I can see that he's simply using her for physical intimacy and as an ATM machine, and not just her money, but mine as well. She mentioned they met around October 23, 2019. I suspect their affair heated up in late October, which is evident from the Dropbox uploads. I'd also like to clarify whether certain events that have come back to my memory over the past few months were coincidental or planned. I previously shared the story of last New Year's Eve trip to Martinique. Prior to that, while in Ireland with our friend who had mobility issues, my wife ventured far ahead on the causeway of Giant's Trail, easily visible to me with her red jacket hundreds of meters ahead. At the time, I assumed she simply loved hiking and couldn't wait for us at our slower pace. Now I suspect she may have used this time alone to secretly use her phone undisturbed. A similar situation occurred 3 days later on the Strand Hill beach. Then, in early January, she informed me of her plan to stay in France from October to December 20th, claiming her sister insisted on it. This was unusually long, and I doubted her sister's role in this decision. She might have orchestrated it herself, hiding behind her sister's request. When the pandemic hit, she had a convenient excuse not to return, and I didn't see her until May. During this time, she used her mother's health as a cover, all the while engaging in a whirlwind romance with the young immigrant and using various excuses to extend her stay with him. I asked her if she was intimate with both the doctor and the immigrant simultaneously, and she admitted that she was mainly intimate with the immigrant ever since she met him. While she hasn't explicitly expressed love for him, she did mention that he is very interesting, which, at this point, seems hardly different. She offered the classic, "I love you, but I'm not in love with you" line. She claims she doesn't want a divorce at this stage, saying, "I'm free to have an affair if I wish," despite her having an affair since 2015 without notifying me. All this time, she was traveling and having an affair, treating our marriage as nothing more than an accessory, much like one of her handbag collections. I can't recall any significant issues in our marriage. Even when our intimacy waned, I attributed it to my cancer. We rarely argued and never resorted to name-calling. I was completely unaware of any problems. Update. Yesterday, I brought up the topic with the attorney, who made it clear that because it was a gift from her mother, I have no legal claim to it. In return, she also has no rights to the inheritance money I put in our living trust when my mother passed away in 2016. However, I receive a pension from the city, and she's entitled to 50% of that. Her business, which was thriving before but took a hit due to the pandemic, could potentially entitle me to 50% of her 50%, but given the current state of her business, close to nothing, it amounts to virtually 25%. The business is in the travel industry. A recent development came to light last night. She got a call from the person looking after her mother in her absence, informing her that her sister, sister's husband, and her mother have all tested positive for COVID-19. I'm uncertain about how this might affect our divorce proceedings. Regarding my pension, it's a Los Angeles City pension, and the 50% allocation is determined by something called the Brown Act. The formula for dividing it in case of divorce is set, and, given my situation of being married before my career started and retiring while married, she's entitled to 50%, without room for negotiation. Currently, her business holds no value. She intends to continue working and rebuilding it, eventually selling her share to her business partner. I'm contemplating hiring a private attorney. She repeatedly expressed her desire to avoid living like before, and voiced her contentment with her life in France, which might as well translate to enjoying multiple extramarital relationships while technically married. She initially considered continuing as usual here, secretly involved with a younger man and her ex-boyfriend. But I've made it clear that this isn't acceptable. I contacted the pension department and they were firm about the 50% entitlement. Lastly, there was one more falsehood. She claimed that after a meeting with her business partner yesterday, they had enough funds to sustain both of them without pay for another 6 months, just as they had done during previous crises in 2001 and 2008, to safeguard their business. She then suggested that she'd work diligently to revive the agency, and if the economy recovered in 2021, sell her share to her business partner and share the proceeds with me. I inquired whether her business partner was on board with this plan, and she assured me that he was. However, this morning, while on my bike, doubt crept in. Given her 6 years of dishonesty, I decided to contact her business partner, who promptly informed me that they had never discussed a buyout, and at the age of 73, he had no interest in purchasing her 50%. The IRAs are in her favor, totaling approximately $130,000, so she intends to give me half, which is $65,000 to make them equal. This isn't an issue as they both consist of the same mutual funds. The house presents a challenge. It's held in a trust that we co-own, and we need to come to an agreement in case one of us wants to sell it. She brought up this matter and I had no response then, nor do I have one now. Perhaps the lawyer can provide guidance. It's likely not an uncommon situation. She won't be filing any tax documents in France. In fact, her last paycheck was in July here. We'll be filing our taxes together for the year 2020. I don't have any plans to return to France. I sent a text to the attorney with a question about my pension, but I haven't received a response yet. The rest of the matters have been settled and are fairly straightforward to split evenly. She's leaving today and won't return until March. We'll schedule more meetings with the attorney during this time. Meanwhile, I've started working on the paperwork. We have a 29-year-old son who lives nearby. He doesn't pass judgment on his mother and isn't very outgoing. Communication has always been a challenge between us. He offered to lend an ear and assured me of his support. I can't decipher his true thoughts. I didn't ask him to take sides, but he became aware of the situation when I removed her belongings from the house. I won't take any action against the doctor's ex or the younger man. I was angry and still am, believing the doctor lacked ethics and morals as a mental health professional, knowing he played a role in the breakup of a long-standing marriage. However, I understand that legally I have no grounds to pursue this. Let's forget about it. The value of the company will only be determined by what they can salvage in the spring. If she's not staying, only her business partner might be interested in buying her shares. She is the driving force and the primary asset of this company. There are no other tangible assets aside from the knowledge, experience, and dedication of the employees who answer the phones. She outperforms the next salesperson by several $1 million. Her business partner indicated last week that he's not keen on buying her out. If I can finalize a deal where everything is divided evenly, including 30% of my pension, I'll accept it. Update. She returned to France because her 89-year-old mother tested positive for COVID and is not doing well. Her mother is currently at home. Wayward wife sent me a text, acknowledging that she won't claim more than 30% of my pension. We're planning to initiate the divorce paperwork with the attorney mediator when she comes back on March 16th. No more pick-me dance. During our drive to LAX the other day, I asked her what she was thinking when she mentioned that she didn't want a divorce. Update. I agree. I won't stir any trouble until she's genuinely committed to the 30% pension limit. The business is now down to only 5 employees. The others, including our son, were laid off. They're not conducting any business at the moment. Last year, they had grossed over $7 million, and in 2018, it was around $6 million. She received substantial bonuses in the form of 401k plans, which she rolled over into her IRAs. That's why her IRAs are larger than mine. However, she hasn't realized yet that we'll make them even. Even the attorney agreed. So, effectively, I'll receive $65,000 from her work. I'm entitled to 25%, which is half of her share, but I'm not holding any unrealistic expectations. If her business partner doesn't buy her out, and he stated last week that he has no intention to do so, my 25% won't be worth anything. We've agreed that she won't claim more than 30% of my pension. We also reached an agreement to equally divide our other assets, including the house. However, I'd like to include a clause that if she remarries the younger man or her ex, she forfeits the 30%. I just don't want to cover her future husband's expenses. That seems fair to me. She doesn't directly say that she will never remarry. She responds with statements like the idea of remarrying is laughable. There's no need for a remarriage and so on. Update. After consulting with my employer's pension department, I've learned that the percentage of the pension she'll receive will remain her property indefinitely. So even if she marries any of her affair partners, she'll still retain her percentage, and I'll be partially contributing to their lifestyle. It doesn't matter that her ex-boyfriend is a neuropsychiatrist who likely earns 10 times more than my pension, or that her younger companion relies on her financially. I don't understand why I should hesitate if an attorney advises me to agree to her having less than 50%. I can't lose more than 50% anyway, so why not have her agree to 30%? If she changes her mind later on, I won't have lost anything more than what I would have initially. I have a Zoom meeting scheduled for next Friday with an attorney who specializes in my line of work and has experience with similar situations. Why am I pursuing a divorce? Because as painful as it is right now, I want to begin a new chapter in my life. I suspect that no intelligent woman would be interested in a long-term relationship with a separated man. I'm 64, and maybe there's still someone out there willing to share the next 10, 15 years with me. Did she secretly stash away any money? No, I saw the paychecks, deposits, W-2s, and I handled the tax payments on April 15th. I also transferred her 401k to her IRA in July when they were considering closing the company. She didn't hide any money. Her affair was purely physical and romantic. She lied and deceived me, but we never had any financial disputes. Moreover, I'm still a part owner of her 50%, and I'm not giving up on that 25%. In California, there might be a law mandating that she receives 50% as the spouse of a pensioner like me, although I'm not certain. At this point, she's willing to sign for 30%. Perhaps she can't accept less than 50%, but she can't get more. I won't receive less than 50%, and I might end up with 70%. I'll find out next Friday. The attorney I'll be consulting specializes in family law and divorce cases for people in the same line of work as I am. The rest of our assets will be split equally. Update: I'm in a lot of pain, but despite my ongoing anger, I feel like I'm doing better than I was last month or the month before. I've been sober since January 1st, and I don't miss alcohol. When I first posted here, a bottle of Jameson, a 6-pack, and 4 bottles of wine would last me 4 days. So, I'm happy about that. I won't rush into anything, but I don't see any obstacles to a fair settlement except for the pension. I distributed the assets in our living trust fairly as we had agreed. She retains her IRAs, and I keep mine. We made up for the $130,000 difference when we divided the trust. My attorney sent me the petition to sign, and there are no issues with splitting the pension 70-30. We will serve her attorney because she is still in France. I've started packing and emptying the house, which is no fun at all. I'm relocating to the Las Vegas area. She's expected to arrive on March 16th, and maybe by then I'll be gone. Just kidding. She has yet to apologize for the pain she caused and has shown no remorse. In December and early January, I asked her questions and sought explanations, but she ignored all of them. There are moments when I still can't believe the whole ordeal. The affair and the lies for nearly 6 years. It's hard to fathom that she, of all people, would do this and lie to me. I'm still very saddened, and I haven't moved past it. Regarding the house and her business, when she initially admitted to the affair on November 3rd, my immediate reaction was to sell the house. Then I changed my mind and wanted to keep it for as long as possible. However, I realized that it would be nearly impossible to move forward while still residing in the house where we spent the last 23 years, which were very happy for me at least. So, we've decided to sell it. She said, "Do whatever you think is best for you." We have no outstanding debts, and we are both in our 60s. She has convinced herself that her involvement was a beautiful love story and not a sordid, unfaithful affair, despite lying to me for nearly 6 years. I can sense it, although it doesn't mean I accept it. It's painful to look back at old photos and think about all the places we've been. With my 25 years in the travel industry, we've visited numerous locations. There were still so many more places to explore together. Over our 40 years together, I often told her that if one day I stopped making her laugh, she should leave me. I didn't realize the soundtrack had come to an end. Am I over her? No, certainly not. Do I want her back? No, I don't. She has become a habitual liar, even for trivial and inconsequential matters. I suppose she gained practice in lying through the 6-year affair. She entered our shared home of 22 years last night and hardly seemed to notice that all the frames, photos, books, plants, and 2 sofas were missing. Her detachment from these possessions and the memories tied to them is almost eerie. Do these things hold any meaning for her? Does she remember that we shared intimate moments on those sofas? Does she recall the laughter we shared with friends and family around that table? I'm not entirely sure she does, or worse, that she even cares. The petition indicated that the value of her business was to be determined, with each of us entitled to 50% of her 50%, which at the moment is worth nothing. She and her business partner are banking on a loan or grant from the SBA to keep them afloat until the fall. For the first time ever, she expressed fatigue from working, the struggle for customers, and her business partner, among other things. I had a great relationship with my mother-in-law over the years. We enjoyed activities like playing tennis, running 10K races, singing, laughing, and engaging in political discussions. We usually had a wonderful time together. Now, at almost 90, her mental decline is rapid. She can no longer read, watch TV for more than a few minutes, and her overall health is deteriorating. She is unaware of our impending divorce and has lost her sense of time, thinking I was in France for Christmas, even though it's been 5 years since my last visit. My new life will begin in early May when I move out, leaving behind the trauma and pain of the last 4 months. However, I can't help but notice that since Monday, she's been acting as if she's done nothing wrong. I'm fairly certain she's telling people that she's found happiness and that there was nothing she could have done to prevent our current situation. If the roles were reversed, with me being the cheating, deceitful husband, I would likely be seen as the lowest of the low. Update. She returned 2 weeks ago. The night before she left, we had one last drink in our home, and I asked her 4 questions. I remained composed, kept my voice steady, and made it clear that these questions were not intrusive or indiscreet. Predictably, she denied all of them. No, she didn't go ahead on hikes to use her phone. No, she didn't disappear at Strand Hill 2 days later to use her phone again. No, the trip to Martinique wasn't planned, but a spontaneous decision. And yes, it was at her sister's insistence that she scheduled her trip to France for 2.5 months. I told her that I believed her, but deep down, I don't. Or rather, I don't truly know. I've now learned that she can lie with a straight face, something I didn't know before D-Day. She fed me the excuse of, "It just happened," but I confronted her, telling her it was nothing but a lame excuse. She made it happen. She wanted it to happen. It was her choice. The divorce should be finalized soon, and I'm moving to Las Vegas in 2 weeks, to a beautifully renovated home in a great neighborhood. So why am I feeling so miserable? The divorce is not yet finalized. In California, the minimum required divorce time is 6 months, and we officially separated on February 25th. I moved into my new small house 2 weeks ago, and during my first golf outing, I met 2 friendly guys who invited me to play again. One of them is married to a French woman and enjoys conversing with me in French. He's about 90% fluent and has a good sense of humor, as well as being a decent golfer. I'm enjoying the warm weather that's not too hot, although I know it won't last. I've had several interactions with her regarding our leased house in LA and other administrative matters, but nothing else. I deeply miss the camaraderie we had when exchanging jokes, anecdotes, and stories. It saddens me to think that that part of my life is gone forever. The divorce proceedings are moving slowly. My lawyer sent me the dissolution stipulation for review last week, and everything appears straightforward. I still communicate with her, although sporadically, mainly about administrative and business matters. When we met in person back in March, she refused to provide an explanation, so it's no surprise she's not giving me one now. I've noticed she has a new way of dealing with difficult questions. She simply ignores them. When a text message seems to bother her, she sets it aside and ignores it. She dislikes confrontations and opts for the easy way out, which is also how she handles her interactions with her sister. It's quite unusual for a business person. We should be done with the divorce within the next 3 months. I'm still very sad, angry, and terribly lonely. I can't fully grasp how she lied to me for over 6 years, deceiving me with loving messages while having affairs with multiple men. Although we were separated due to COVID and travel was impossible, her infidelity began 4 months before that, and she was already deep into the deception. Here's something almost amusing. We had a joint bank account for various reasons, with the understanding that we could both use it for regular expenses. However, if one of us needed to use the account for an unexpected or large expense, we had to inform the other. This arrangement worked well, but it seems she felt so guilty that she couldn't spend on her affair partner, knowing that I would see it. Update. My soon-to-be ex-wife now primarily resides in France, taking care of her mother during the day and spending time with her affair partner in the evenings. She flew in yesterday to meet with her business partner and visit our son. I mentioned back in early February that I was looking at houses in Las Vegas. She likely found out through our son that I had purchased one, and then she expressed interest in seeing it. I was contemplating whether that was a good idea, but you all convinced me otherwise. So I canceled the SUV rental from Enterprise earlier. She doesn't stay with me, but in the adjacent condo, which belongs to her mother and where our son lives. Her mother returned to France when her health deteriorated. As of now, I'm not entirely sure if she's still involved with her Algerian affair partner, but it's a possibility. She arrived home last night as planned. Before her flight, she asked me to pick her up from the airport. I didn't really want to, but I could sense from her voice that she wasn't feeling well or that something was bothering her. I probably should have declined, but I'm still maintaining a civil relationship with her. So I went to pick her up at LAX. When I saw her face, it was evident that she looked terrible. I wondered if something was wrong with her mother, but I didn't bother asking. We hadn't even left the parking lot when she dropped a bombshell. Her Algerian affair partner had ended things with her. I didn't react visibly to her news. I'm not sure why she shared it with me. Maybe she needed someone to talk to or to seek comfort from, or perhaps it was because she wasn't financially supporting him enough now that her business had failed. Regardless, I didn't respond to her revelation. She followed up by mentioning that her doctor ex-boyfriend had invited her to go hiking with him the next time she visits France. I know her well enough to see through her intentions. The whirlwind affair with the young Algerian had come to an end, and now she seemed to be trying to entice me back into the relationship by making me jealous with the ski trip proposal. She also asked if she could come and see my house in Vegas, but I lied and said it wasn't ready yet. I couldn't just tell her to go away, as that might risk her reneging on her previous agreements. As I mentioned before, I won't create any problems until the divorce is finalized. That should take about 6 months, which is the minimum duration in California. Why wait? Because if she becomes upset with me during this time, she could potentially claim an additional 20% of my pension. She's entitled to 50%, but she agreed to settle for 30%, against the advice of her attorney. That 30% represents around $1,500 per month for life, a significant sum for my budget. Both of us have legal representation, and our attorneys are handling the necessary procedures. The divorce petition has been prepared and is currently being processed.